invitation from Hamas to say that Witkoff is welcome to come and engage in direct talks with Hamas to see for himself what the situation is, and to hear directly from Palestinians and from Palestinian leadership, where they are on the unfolding ceasefire. Emily, Witkoff's intervention into this, at Trump's behest into this conflict, has seemed to change the tenor of it. But what Netanyahu is showing here, it seems, is that he is intent on ratcheting up violence, wherever and whenever he can. Now, Bezalel Smotrich was quoted as saying that this raid in Jenin was authorized by the war cabinet as a new kind of war aim in exchange for Smotrich and his party agreeing to the ceasefire in Gaza. So, in other words, if we're gonna sign on to this ceasefire, you have to launch this incursion into Jenin and make this not just a police action, as sometimes happens in Jenin, but a full-scale invasion. Netanyahu agreed to that, and is also saying that he holds open the possibility of, not just possibility, but almost the certainty of resuming the war in Gaza, but then enter Witkoff. Do you think that Witkoff or Trump kind of have the will to intervene here? Because it seems like they'd have to just constantly be fending this off. Like, this isn't the kind of thing you can do once and then it's done. They have to be there with their foot in the door, keeping it from closing at all times.
Well, and basically no Republican president other than Donald Trump would have agreed to this particular ceasefire deal. This is another way in which he totally confuses the boundaries, or he totally sort of explodes the boundaries of acceptable policy maneuvering on the right. And so I don't know that people in Trump's orbit expected what you just laid out, Ryan, which I think is totally correct, because we know one thing Donald Trump is more sensitive about than just about anything else is looking a fool, being made to look a fool. He doesn't seem to particularly like Benjamin Netanyahu, we've mentioned before, but he reposted that Jeffrey Sachs video about a month ago, and he's had plenty of criticism for Netanyahu in the past. So I don't think he wants to put up with Netanyahu's, or what he sees as Netanyahu's bullshit. He doesn't want to look like he's being steered by Benjamin Netanyahu, and that he is not fully in control as Donald Trump. And that's the dynamic I think that's going to unfold with alongside this new ideological component, to the point about no Republican president, agreeing to this deal other than Donald Trump. I don't think most Republicans in Congress would have agreed to this deal, and maybe not even in his own cabinet. And so Elise Stefanik, as she was going through... Before we get to her, one other piece that people have probably seen, Trump was asked about whether he thought the ceasefire in Gaza would hold at one of his Oval Office press conferences, and he said, "I doubt it." And it's not. He said it's their war, which I'm sure was cause for celebration in Tel Aviv among Netanyahu's circle. Right, but what does that mean in terms of U.S. support? So is that what's on the table with Donald Trump?
That's a very good question.
This is your war?
Right. Is it our weapons in their war? Because that. Right, exactly. And what makes it their war rather than our war? So that seems to be his wish. Like, I think that's what Donald Trump wishes, that it was their war and not ours, but it is ours.
Well, and a big reason for that is because the sort of ideological convictions of the sort of coalition that's been part of the Republican Party for a long time that we'll see on display here is E5. This is Elise Stefanik getting asked. And remember, Trump's ambassador to Israel is Mike Huckabee as well. So when you hear Elise Stefanik's answer to this question, just bear in mind that this is, obviously we all know this. You don't even need to be reminded of this, a fairly consensus position among the sort of intellectual class of the Republican Party. Maybe not the median Republican voter, although I'm sure many would say yes. But here's how Elise Stefanik handled the question about the kind of ideological underpinnings of her position here.
Answers in my office, but I did ask you whether you subscribe to the views of Finance Minister Smotrich.
Who? I'm sorry, Finance.
Smotrich, this is the Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich, and the former National Security Minister Ben-Gvir, who believe that Israel has a biblical right to the entire West Bank. And in that conversation, you told me that, yes, you shared that view. Is that your view today?
Yes.
Okay. I think when it comes to this very difficult issue, if the president is going to succeed at bringing peace and stability to the Middle East, we're going to have to look at the UN Security Council resolutions, not just the ones on Lebanon, which we should enforce, but other UN Security Council resolutions. And it's going to be very difficult to achieve that if you continue to hold the view that you just expressed, which is a view that was not held by the founders of the State of Israel, who were secular Zionists, not religious Zionists.
Okay, so she's being confirmed for ambassador to the United Nations, and you could parse that in a bunch of different ways. I'm sure she could, or a defender of hers could argue that when she says she believes that there's a biblical claim to those lands, they just mean it in terms of like the Bible laying out the history of the Jewish people having a claim to being the indigenous people.
Well, the claim is different than right?
But, I mean, so I think the obvious, and an evangelical Christian like a Mike Huckabee would say that biblical Israel and the way that it's sort of described, not just in the Old Testament, but the New Testament, is referring to the modern political state of Israel. And that's not an uncommon belief in evangelical circles. It's not an uncommon belief in many religious circles. So I think that's likely the interpretation that's correct in this case, in her case, to explain why Elise Stefanik answered the question that way.
Yeah, you can say the word Israel is in the Bible. Like, okay, that's true. But like what that has to do with UN security resolutions is like nothing.
It definitely makes any two-state solution, which is like the point that U.S. politicians push on Israel when Netanyahu says he doesn't believe in a two-state solution. That's the ideological position of secular Zionists, even somebody like Netanyahu, and that's a pretty hard square to circle if you're trying to deal with the West Bank. And
so it's such a convoluted mess because of that out of control ideological like a relationship to Zionism that you're describing there, coupled with some other developments that we're seeing, not just the ceasefire that we have so far, but also we can put up this next element up on the screen here. Trump, in one of his first actions, stripped John Bolton of the security detail.
That's a great tweet, though, by the way. You should read it on the screen if people aren't looking at this tweet. Matthew Petty tweeted, "The Iran deal 2.0 will be offering John Bolton as a blood sacrifice in exchange for building Trump Tower, Tehran," which is, like everything in this era, a joke, but also not a joke. Like, these are the times we're living in. Like Trump just yesterday was talking about how North Korea has incredible condo opportunities because of the seafront, so much seafront property. He talked about how spectacular you could do a kind of condo rebuild in Gaza. So the idea of a Trump Tower, Tehran, is not ridiculous. And the idea literally
of
doing one in
sacrifice,
Saudi Arabia. No, I mean, they literally announced, the Trump organization literally recently announced they're doing a second Saudi Arabian tower. Like, it's to your point, Ryan, like it's a joke, but they're also like literally building these towers and with countries that we do these like extremely important foreign relations with. And Trump is technically divested from Trump organization at all of that. But we don't need to open up the can of worms to say that the joke has some legs.
Yeah, and my view on the Bolton, I'm curious for your take on this. My view on the Bolton decision to not give him this 24-hour security anymore is, Bolton, like, I don't want anybody killed, but Bolton has made his choices. Bolton has decided to live by the sword, like the most militaristic kind of policy career that you could really conjure up in 20th and 21st century America. Like the body count that trails behind him is just completely countless. So